What happens when one of America's most brilliant atheist professors faces off against a former Calvinist turned Catholic philosopher? What you're about to discover changed the landscape of Christian apologetics forever. October 1994, Boston College, 2 professors. One question that would shake the academic world: does God exist? By the end of this debate, one man's worldview would crumble, thousands of minds would be changed, and a legendary book would be born. Quick visual montage of Boston College, debate podium, book covers. This is the untold story of the Boston College debate that Peter Kreeft calls the most important 90 minutes of his academic career. And what happened next? It will blow your mind. Before we dive into this legendary showdown, you need to understand who Peter Kreeft really is. This isn't just any professor. Born into a strict Calvinist family, Kreeft seemed destined for a predictable Protestant academic career. But then something unexpected happened. During his studies, he encountered medieval philosophy, Gothic architecture, and Thomas Aquinas. Visual: Gothic cathedral interiors, medieval manuscripts. The man who was supposed to become Calvin College's next great Reformed theologian shocked everyone by converting to Catholicism. But that was just the beginning. By 1994, Kreeft had already written over 40 books, taught at Boston College for decades, and become what many called America's C.S. Lewis. But he had never faced a challenge quite like this one. Enter Paul Brines. If you don't know this name, you should. Brines wasn't your typical campus atheist. Academic photos, book covers, a brilliant historian, specializing in German intellectual history and radical politics. This was a man who had spent his entire career studying the philosophical underpinnings of belief systems and tearing them apart. Dramatic pause. Brines had one mission: to demonstrate that belief in God was not only irrational, but intellectually embarrassing for any serious academic. He had demolished religious arguments before. He was confident he could do it again. Building tension with music. When Boston College announced this debate, the academic world took notice. This wasn't going to be a gentle philosophical discussion. This was intellectual warfare. But here's what makes this debate absolutely explosive. Both men had everything to lose. Split-screen imagery of both professors. For Kreeft, this wasn't just about defending God's existence. After his dramatic conversion from Calvinism to Catholicism, he had built his entire career on the rational foundation of faith. A loss here would undermine decades of work. Images of Kreeft's books, Boston College Philosophy Department. For Brines, the stakes were equally high. He represented the intellectual elite's view that religious belief was primitive superstition. In front of his own colleagues, he had to prove that even the most sophisticated Christian philosopher couldn't make a rational case for God. Setting: debate preparation images. October 15th, 1994. The auditorium was packed. Students, faculty, local intellectuals. Word had spread beyond campus. This wasn't just a debate. It was a cultural moment. The format was simple but brutal. Each professor would present their case, then face cross-examination. No holding back, no academic politeness. Pure intellectual combat. Debate podium, academic setting. Brines went first. His argument was devastating in its simplicity. Text overlay with key points. If God exists, why is there evil? Why do children suffer? Why do natural disasters kill innocent people? Either God can't stop evil, making him powerless, or he won't stop evil, making him malevolent. Either way, he's not God. The audience was impressed. This was the problem of evil in its most concentrated form. Kreeft had 20 minutes to respond to humanity's oldest question. Tension building. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of giving a typical philosophical response, Kreeft did something unexpected. He told a story. He talked about a conversation with a student who had lost her parents in a car accident. She asked him the same question. Where was God when my parents died? Kreeft's answer? The same place he was when his own son died. On a cross. But Kreeft wasn't done. He systematically dismantled the logical problem of evil. First, free will requires the possibility of evil choices. Second, moral growth requires overcoming challenges. Third, the greatest goods, love, courage, sacrifice, only exist in response to evil. Then Kreeft delivered his knockout punch. Professor Bryans, you're outraged by evil because you believe in good. But in a purely materialist universe, where did this sense of justice come from? Your very outrage at suffering points to a moral law, and moral laws require a moral lawgiver. Audience reaction imagery. The room went silent. Bryans paused, visibly shaken. For the first time in the debate, he seemed uncertain. What happened next is what turned this debate into legend. During the cross-examination, Bryans tried to recover. He attacked the reliability of religious experience, the historical claims of Christianity, the problem of religious diversity. But Kreeft was ready. Years of teaching Socratic method had prepared him for this moment. Instead of defending, Kreeft went on offense. Professor Bryans, you claim to be a rational skeptic. But tell me, do you believe other minds exist? Of course, Bryans replied. Can you prove it scientifically? Can you demonstrate that I'm not just a sophisticated robot? Can you show me another person's consciousness in a laboratory? Bryans realized the trap. He couldn't prove other minds exist using his own strict materialist criteria. Yet he obviously believed they do. Kreeft continued. You accept the existence of other minds based on inference, experience, and practical necessity. The same types of evidence I use for God's existence. Why is one rational and the other isn't? Visual representation of the logical trap. The audience was mesmerized. They were watching intellectual history being made. By the debate's end, something extraordinary had happened. Not a single mind in that auditorium was unchanged. Students who came as confident atheists left questioning everything. Professors who expected an easy victory for secularism found themselves confronting the depth of Christian philosophy. Newspaper, clippings, academic responses. But the most shocking reaction came from an unexpected source. Paul Bryans himself. Asterisk. 3 weeks after the debate, Bryans approached Kreeft privately. I can't stop thinking about what you said, he admitted. I'm not ready to believe, but I can no longer dismiss belief as irrational. For a militant atheist to make such an admission was unprecedented. The debate had cracked open a worldview that seemed unshakable. Kreeft knew he had witnessed something historic. That's why he did something that would impact thousands more lives. He turned the entire debate into a book. Does God exist? The Great Debate. It became one of the most influential apologetics texts of the 1990s. But the real victory wasn't intellectual. It was personal. The debate proved that rigorous philosophy and genuine faith could not only coexist, but strengthen each other. Here's what this debate teaches us. Truth isn't afraid of questions. The most profound challenges to faith often become the strongest confirmations of it. Inspirational music begins. Peter Kreeft walked into that auditorium as a philosopher defending God. He walked out as something more, proof that intellectual honesty and deep faith aren't enemies. They're allies. Today, almost 30 years later, that debate continues to change lives. Students discover it. Skeptics wrestle with it. Believers find courage in it. Direct address to camera. But here's my question for you. Are you ready to engage with the deepest questions of existence? Are you willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it challenges everything you thought you knew? If this story inspired you, if it made you think, if it challenged you to dig deeper, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this channel is dedicated to exploring the big questions with intellectual honesty and courage. And tell me in the comments, what's the most challenging question about faith you've ever encountered? I read every single comment, and your questions might just inspire our next video. Remember, the truth is always worth pursuing, especially when it changes everything.